I didn't cry that night. I remember thinking that was strange, that after everything I heard standing in that hallway, after my daughter's voice cut through the wall like that, I didn't cry. I just walked back to my room, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the carpet for a long time. The carpet was beige. I had picked it out, actually, back when Lydia and her husband first moved into this house. She'd called me and said, "Mom, I don't know anything about flooring." And I'd driven 40 minutes to the Home Depot in Marietta and spent 2 hours with a samples book until we found something that worked. I thought about that, sitting there in the dark, beige carpet I had picked out myself. Then I got up, opened my laptop, and started making a list. My name is Agnes. I am 68 years old. I taught high school English at Roswell Academy for 31 years, and I raised 2 children, mostly by myself after my husband Clifford passed from a stroke when our kids were still teenagers. I am not a dramatic woman. I have never in my life made a scene at a family dinner or sent a letter I'd regret in the morning. I am practical. I am patient. Those qualities served me well for a long time. They also, I think, made certain people believe I would never push back. I need to back up. After Clifford died, this was 15 years ago now, I stayed in our house in Alpharetta for a long time. It was too big for one person, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every room had something of him in it. The nail holes in the garage wall from his pegboard of tools, the way the kitchen door stuck in humidity because he'd always meant to fix it and never got around to it. I kept that stuck door for 10 years like it was sacred. My son Owen lives in Seattle. He has a good life out there. Software company. A wife I like very much. 2 grandchildren who video call me every Sunday. He invited me to move west after I retired, and I considered it. But Seattle felt like surrender somehow. Like moving somewhere I'd never belonged just to avoid being alone somewhere I had. Lydia is my younger one. She lives here in Georgia, 40 minutes from the house I raised her in. When I finally sold the Alpharetta house 3 years ago, Lydia was the one who suggested I come stay with them while I figured out my next step. "Just temporarily, Mom," she said, "until you find a condo or something. No rush." Her husband Reginald nodded along beside her at the kitchen table, and I remember feeling so grateful I almost couldn't speak. I didn't want to be a burden. I said so, actually, out loud. I said, "I don't want to be in the way." And Lydia took my hand and said, "You could never be in the way." I moved into their guest room in January. That was not temporary, as it turned out. 1 month became 3. 3 became 6. I started paying for groceries, insisted on it, and helped with the grandchildren after school. Their 2 girls, ages 7 and 10, became the best part of my day. We did homework at the kitchen table. We watched cooking videos and tried to make croissants from scratch. One rainy Saturday, they called me Grandma Aggie and climbed into my bed on weekend mornings, and I thought, this is enough. This is more than enough. Reginald, I should say, had always been cordial. Not warm, cordial. The difference matters. He said please and thank you. He asked about my doctor appointments with the polite attentiveness of someone who has been coached to ask. In the 3 years I've known him, I don't think he and I ever had a real conversation. But I told myself that was fine. Some people are just reserved. Some people need time. What I didn't know, what I was quietly and carefully not knowing, I think, was that Reginald had been building a case. I found out in April I'd gone to bed early that night because I had a cardiology follow-up in the morning and I wanted to be rested. My heart condition, paroxysmal atrial fibrillation, which sounds more terrifying than it is but is still, at my age, something to manage carefully, had been stable for 2 years. My cardiologist, Dr. Okafor in Dunwoody, was pleased with my numbers. I took 2 medications in the morning and 1 at night, and I walked 30 minutes every day, and I did not consider myself sick in any meaningful way. I had told Lydia about the AFib when I was first diagnosed because she's my daughter, and she had a right to know. I told her it was well managed. I told her Dr. Okafor called me his model patient, because I actually did what he said. She had hugged me and said she was glad I was taking care of myself, and that had been the end of it. Reginald, apparently, had not felt the same way. I was almost asleep when I heard them in the hallway outside my room. The house is a newer build, one of those open concept layouts where sound travels in ways the builder doesn't mention during the walkthrough. I had learned in 3 years living there exactly which conversations were mine to overhear whether I wanted to or not. I had never once intentionally listened. That night, I didn't have a choice. They were right outside my door. Lydia's voice first. She had an appointment today. It went fine. Then Reginald, and I will tell you his voice was not raised. That was the part that stayed with me afterward. That he wasn't yelling, he was just matter of fact, the way you discuss a business problem. I looked up what she has, Lydia. It doesn't go away. It gets worse. People with that condition have strokes. They need caregivers. I am not signing up to be a caregiver in my own home. A pause. She's not asking you to take care of her, Lydia said. Quieter now. She doesn't have to ask. That's the point. She's here, and she's sick, and it becomes our problem. I want her to have her own place. I want her out of this house before something happens. I lay very still. She's my mother, Lydia said. I know she's your mother. I'm not saying abandon her. I'm saying she should not be living here. There are assisted living facilities, nice ones. She can afford it. She sold that house. She has money. This is not a financial conversation. And here his voice dropped low enough that I could feel him working to keep it steady. I don't want to come home one day and find her on the floor. I don't want our girls to have that experience. And I don't want our life to become organized around someone else's health problems. Is that so terrible to say? Long silence. She picked out our flooring, Lydia said finally, which was such a strange, small thing to say that I almost wanted to laugh. Lydia. I'll talk to her, my daughter said. I'll figure something out. I heard their bedroom door close. I lay in the dark for a long time. The numbers on my phone clock glowed. 11:47. Then 11:52. Then midnight. Here is what I want you to understand about that moment. I was not devastated in the way I might have been 20 years ago. What I felt was something colder and clearer than devastation. I had spent 31 years in a classroom, which means I had spent 31 years reading people, understanding exactly what they meant versus what they said. I had heard my son-in-law say, in the most careful, non-hysterical language possible, that he wanted me gone because I was inconvenient and might get sick and die near him. And my daughter had said, I'll figure something out. Not. Absolutely not. Not, this is my mother, and she stays. Not even, let me think about this. She said she'd figure something out, which meant she already knew the conclusion. She was just figuring out the delivery. I got up at 12:30 and opened my laptop. I want to be clear about something. I am not a wealthy woman in any spectacular sense, but I am not without resources either. When Clifford and I sold the commercial property he bought in Gwinnett County in the 90s, the strip mall that nobody thought was worth anything and then suddenly was, when the area built up, we put the proceeds into a trust, split evenly between Owen and me when Clifford passed. My share had been sitting in that trust for 15 years, conservatively managed, doing what money does when nobody panics and touches it. I had also sold my house in Alpharetta, which by then had appreciated in ways that still surprised me when I thought about it. That money was in a separate account. I was, in other words, in a position to leave whenever I wanted to. I had simply, until that night, not wanted to. I opened my laptop and I started with real estate. I looked at condominiums in Dunwoody and Sandy Springs, close to my cardiologist, familiar neighborhood, the kind of clean, modest buildings where retired teachers actually live. I had looked at some of them 3 years ago, before I moved in with Lydia, and talked myself out of it because she'd offered, and I'd wanted to be near the grandchildren. Now I looked at them with different eyes. I pulled up 3 listings and saved them. I looked at the square footage and the HOA fees and the proximity to the Publix on Abernathy Road that I liked. Then I opened a different tab. I had a will. I had made it after Cliff had died, when the grief counselor I was seeing at the time gently recommended I get my documents in order. I had left my estate, the trust, the savings, everything, split equally between Lydia and Owen. Standard. Unexamined. The kind of thing you do because it's the obvious thing. I have a lawyer named Dwight Osei whose firm is in Buckhead. I've known him for 12 years. He handled the Alpharetta house sale. He is meticulous and discreet, and he does not waste your time with nonsense. I wrote him an email at 1:14 in the morning. I told him I needed to discuss a revision to my will and my trust documentation. I told him it was not urgent, but I wanted to move on it within the next 2 weeks. I told him I was also interested in looking at a few properties. Then I closed the laptop, and I slept better than I had in months. Lydia came to my room 2 days later. She knocked first, which she didn't always do, and I thought, she's preparing herself. I was sitting in the armchair by the window with a book I wasn't really reading, and when she came in and sat on the edge of the bed, I could see she had been thinking about this for 48 hours and still hadn't found the right words. "Mom," she started. "It's okay," I said. She blinked. "What?" "I've actually been thinking about getting my own place for a while now," I said, which was not entirely untrue. I had thought about it, just not urgently until recently. "I appreciate everything you've done, but I think it's time." She looked at me with this complicated expression I recognized from when she was a teenager and had expected a fight and gotten something else. Relief and guilt at the same time, neither one winning. "I don't want you to feel pushed out," she said carefully. "I don't," I said. "I feel like I'm 68 years old and I should probably have my own home." She exhaled. "Okay, can I help?" "I'm already looking," I said. "I'll let you know when I find something." Here is what I did not say. "I'll let you know when I find something." Here is what I did not say. I know about the hallway conversation. I know exactly why we're having this one. I know that your husband categorized me as a liability before I was even symptomatic, and that you agreed with him on some level, and that the woman who used to climb into my bed when she had bad dreams is now going to help me find somewhere else to sleep. I did not say any of that. I am practical. I had things to do. I found my condo in 3 weeks. It's on the 6th floor of a building in Sandy Springs, 1,200 square feet, 2 bedrooms, a balcony that looks east so I get the morning light. The HOA handles the exterior and the landscaping, and there's a pool I will probably use exactly twice, but like to look at. The building has a mix of ages. Young professionals, a few other retirees, a retired oncologist on my floor named Joanna, who I've since become friends with. I put in the offer on a Tuesday. I put down enough to keep the monthly payment comfortable. I called Owen in Seattle that night and told him. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Mom, are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine, honey. I found a really nice place," and he said, "That's not what I asked." My son has always been like that. Precise. "I'm better than okay," I told him. "I promise." I did not tell him about the hallway. Not yet. What I did tell him, what I told both my children in the same calm, ordinary voice, was that I had updated my will. I framed it as routine. Long overdue. Responsible estate planning, the kind of thing you put off and then eventually stop putting off. Owen said that was smart. Lydia said she was glad I was getting organized. Neither of them asked any questions. What I had actually done, in Dwight Assay's conference room in Buckhead over 2 Tuesday afternoons, was this. I restructured the trust, the bulk of my estate. The Gwinnett Trust, the savings from the house sale, a life insurance policy Clifford had left me that I had kept current all these years, was redirected. Owen's share stayed the same. Lydia's share of the trust went into a separate sub-trust designated for her daughter's education and adult lives, managed independently, not accessible to Lydia or Reginald until the girls turned 25. Lydia herself received a modest direct bequest, enough to be meaningful, not enough to be life-changing. The life insurance policy, the substantial one, the one Reginald had apparently looked up, according to what I'd overheard, was changed. The beneficiary was updated to a charitable foundation I have supported for years, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in Georgia. It had been Clifford's idea originally, something we talked about doing and never formalized. I formalized it. Dwight looked at me over his glasses when we went through the final documents. "You're sure?" he said. "I'm sure," I said. "These are significant changes." I know what they are, I said. I wrote them. He nodded once the way he does, and we moved on. I moved into the Sandy Springs condo on the 1st of June. I had less furniture than I thought, which turned out to be freeing. I bought a few things that were actually mine, chosen for my space, and it felt different from how I expected. It felt like surfacing, like I'd been holding my breath in a house full of beige carpet I'd picked out for someone else, and now I was breathing. The grandchildren came to see the new place the second weekend. Lydia brought them over, and they ran to the balcony and looked out at the skyline, and the older one said, "Grandma Aggie, you can see so far from here," in this awed voice. And I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't known was clenched. Reginald did not come. Lydia said he was at a work thing. It was a Saturday. I set up a proper guest room for the girls and let them pick out the sheets. They chose a navy blue with small moons on it. We made pasta from scratch that afternoon, just us three, and I watched them flour the counter with too much flour and argue about whose turn it was to crank the pasta machine, and I thought, I didn't lose anything, I just changed the terms. The months passed. I will tell you that it was in August when Owen called me, not on a Sunday, which was unusual, and said, "Mum, did you know Reginald has a gambling problem?" I was quiet for a moment. "Where did you hear that?" I said. "Lydia called me," he said. "She's in a bad place. Apparently, it's been going on for a while. Online sports betting, mostly. He got into some trouble last spring, but she thought it was resolved. It wasn't." I looked at the morning light on my balcony. A Saturday. Quiet. "How bad?" I said. Owen told me. It was bad enough, not catastrophic in the way that destroys a marriage overnight, but the kind of bad that makes you understand certain things retroactively. Why someone is anxious about money in a way they won't articulate directly. Why someone builds a case for removing a perceived financial complication from their household. Why someone is very, very interested in what his mother-in-law's estate looks like. I had not known about the gambling. But I had known enough. Lydia called me that evening. I could tell she had been crying. She told me what Owen had told me, and then some more, and then she went quiet, and I waited. "Mom," she said, "I'm so sorry. About everything." "I know," I said. "I should never have." She stopped. "You knew about the hallway conversation." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Oh, Mom." Her voice broke in a very small way, just at the end of those two words. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. I didn't know what to do, and I just—" "You didn't have to do anything," I said. "That's the part I need you to hear," I said. "That's the part I need you to hear. I didn't need you to fight for me. I needed to know whether you would. And you didn't. And that told me something, and I made decisions accordingly." A long silence. "What decisions?" she said. I told her then, not everything, not the specific numbers, because that's not useful and it's not kind. But I told her about the revised trust. I told her that the direct inheritance she would have received from me had been significantly restructured. I told her that her daughters were protected and their futures were taken care of, and that I hoped she understood that I did not do this out of punishment, but out of practicality. The same practicality her husband had applied to me that night in the hallway. She was quiet for a long time. "He was thinking about your estate," she said very low. Not a question, putting it together. "I don't know what he was thinking," I said honestly. "I only know what he said. Mom, I love you. I love you so much, and I know," I said. "I love you, Sue, Lydia. That hasn't changed. None of this changes that." "Then can we?" "Yes," I said, before she could finish. "Yes. Come have dinner Sunday, bring the girls. Don't bring him right now, I think we both need a little time. But come." She cried in a different way then. Relieved, I sat on the balcony after we hung up and watched the light change over the city. It was evening, still warm, the way Atlanta evenings are in August, slow to cool, like the day is reluctant to let go. I thought about Clifford. I thought about how he used to say that the thing about being practical was that people confused it with being cold. He was not a cold man, and neither am I. Practical means you deal with what is actually in front of you. It means you don't argue with reality. You look at it and you make a list, and you figure out what comes next. What came next for me was this. I signed up for a watercolor class at the Sandy Springs Art Center on Thursday evenings. I joined a book club that my neighbor Joanna runs out of the building's common room. I started a correspondence with a former student of mine, a woman named Tamsin, who is now a professor at Emory, and who had found me on social media to tell me that a short story I'd assigned in 1998 had changed her life in some way she still couldn't fully explain. We email once a week now. I go to Dr. Okafor every 4 months, and my AFib remains well managed. He still calls me his model patient. I take my 2 pills in the morning and one at night, and I walk every day, usually around the little park 2 blocks from my building where there are old oak trees and an unreasonable number of ducks. My granddaughters come twice a month now, just the two of them on Saturdays, the way they used to in the beginning before things got complicated. The older one is almost 12. The younger one, who has Clifford's eyes and stubbornness, told me last month that she wants to be an English teacher when she grows up. I told her that was a very good decision. Lydia and I are working on things. It is slow and it is real. And it is not like it was before, which I think is actually better. Before had a softness to it that was partly pretend. What we have now has some roughness at the edges, but it's honest. She came to my watercolor class last month as a visitor and sat next to me at the table, and we painted badly together for 2 hours and laughed at ourselves. And on the drive home she said, "I missed you, Mom." And I said, "I missed you too." And both of us meant something bigger than what we were saying. As for Reginald, he and Lydia are in counseling, which she tells me is helping, which I hope is true. I have no particular anger toward him. I understand that fear makes people calculate. I understand that being afraid of loss can make you want to preemptively control everything around you. I understand all of that. I just stopped being a thing he could calculate. There is something I want to say to anyone who might be where I was. Sleeping in a guest room, in a house you helped furnish, shrinking yourself to take up less space, telling yourself it's fine because the grandchildren are right down the hall. It is not fine. Tolerable is not the same as fine. And the moment you start being managed rather than loved, when someone is figuring out what to do about you instead of talking to you, you do not have to wait for them to make a decision. You can make your own. I did not take $12 million. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine, but I did take myself. I picked up my own life with both hands, and I moved it 6 floors up, and I pointed it east toward the morning light. And I have not once, not for a single morning, wished I had waited longer to do it. I've thought a lot about what I would say if someone asked me whether I regret any of it. The leaving, the lawyer, the will, the quiet, deliberate way I dismantled what I had assumed was a safe place for myself, and honestly, the only thing I regret is how long I spent making myself small enough to fit. Here's what I know now that I didn't fully understand then. The way people treat you is information. Not a judgment about your worth, just information. When Reginald stood in that hallway and talked about me like a problem to be routed around, he wasn't telling me something about who I was. He was telling me something about what he was working with inside himself. Fear. Calculation. The kind of thinking that turns a 68-year-old woman who picked out your carpet into a line item on a risk assessment. I can't be angry at a man for being afraid. But I also don't have to organize my life around his comfort. What I could control was my response. And I think that's the thing that matters most when you're in a situation like mine, not whether the hurt is real, because it was real, but what you decide to do while you're still in it. I didn't yell. I didn't confront. I didn't make Lydia choose in a dramatic kitchen table conversation that everyone would have regretted. I just got very clear, very quietly, about what I actually had and what I actually wanted. That clarity, I think, is something you build over a lifetime. 31 years in a classroom teaching teenagers how to read between the lines of a story. 30 years of marriage to a man who taught me that the most important decisions you make are the ones nobody sees you making. Clifford used to say, "Don't argue with what's happening. Deal with it." So I dealt with it. And what happened What always happens when people act out of self-interest without considering the full picture is that the thing they were trying to protect themselves from became the thing they had to face anyway. Reginald wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of losing control over his household, his finances, his future. And in trying to quietly push out the one person who had never asked anything of him, he set in motion the exact outcome he feared. Not because I punished him. I didn't. I simply stopped being available as a solution to a problem he hadn't admitted he had. Lydia and I are still finding our way back to each other. It is slower than I'd like and more honest than it used to be, and I think honest is better even when it's uncomfortable. She is learning something too, that love without courage is just habit. That saying, I'll figure something out when someone you love needs you to say absolutely not is a kind of failure, even when it comes from fear. I don't hold it against her. But I also don't pretend it didn't happen. And my granddaughters, with their navy moon sheets and too much flour on the counter, they will one day be women who have to decide what they're worth and who gets to stay close to them. I hope what they remember about their grandmother is not that she was sick or old or someone who needed to be figured out. I hope they remember that she packed her own boxes, signed her own name on a sixth-floor condo in Sandy Springs, and pointed herself east toward the morning light. That's the thing about taking care of yourself when no one else will. It turns out to be the most instructive thing you can do for the people watching.